Hey folks, Marc here. If you've ever heard one of the following terms, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Stanley Cups, Crumble Cookies, Erewhon Smoothies, Dubai Chocolate, and of course, Labubu. Now I don't even know why I said if you've heard one of these terms, because you absolutely have. I've personally made a video about the Labubu craze, and there's about 8,000 other videos on all these viral products, and also about overconsumption and our apparent addiction to buying dumb stuff and showing it off on the internet. And today, I wanted to investigate what makes these trends stir such emotions on both ends. For people who sell their kidneys for the ugliest bag charm I've ever seen in my life, what makes them do that? And for the people, like probably you, who hate these things with a burning passion and will show up for a 40-minute long YouTube video making fun of them, what makes you do that? Well, I have theories. And for this video about 800-calorie cookies and water bottles, I think we need to start in the most obvious place possible, with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. You see, something like the 1950s to the 1970s was really the peak for workers in America, which is not to say that there weren't massive societal and political issues like racism and Jim Crow, issues that are still not resolved even after decades of activism and the civil rights movement. But just in terms of pure economics, of who had what, this was the era where the middle class was not just surviving, but thriving. But then Ronald and Margaret here introduced a new economic regime, the Reagan Revolution, which shifted power and profits away from workers in the middle class and towards the people at the top who owned everything. And they achieved this, in part, by convincing all of us that we could be our own mini versions of the 1% through the joys of home ownership. Yes, while union membership dropped and wages stagnated for the last 50 years, the deal was simple. Sure, you're making less, but credit is cheap now. Go buy yourself a house, go take out a mortgage. And so for your parents' generation, or possibly your parents' generation, or possibly your generation, I don't know how old you are, the deal was that even though your income was staying the same decade after decade, the value of your home was constantly going up. It's an investment, it's your piggy bank. So buy the biggest house you can afford, and ideally one you can't afford, and it will essentially be the retirement account that you live in. And it's also the definition of keeping up with the Joneses, because the house you lived in determined how your neighbors see you, how your friends see you, what schools your kids go to. And it's not a bad deal necessarily, it's just that, it only worked for one generation. Sure, there are now tens of millions of boomers and middle-aged Americans who are now sleeping in a sizable amount of wealth, but for the millennials and zoomers who missed the boat, you are what's known economically as completely out of luck, because now you've got the sad part of this economic reality, which is the stagnated wages, without being invested in the good part, which is constantly inflating home and asset prices. Let me give you an example. In my home of Morris County, New Jersey, the average home costs $725,000, even if you're making $100K. And you have a fiance making $100K. If you guys have student loans, health insurance to pay for, a car loan, you're f***ed. Even if you can cobble together a down payment by some act of God. Now what, you're gonna move into that house, live paycheck to paycheck, and even consider the astronomical cost of raising a child? Probably not. And so given how difficult the scenario is for young people, there's really only one reasonable alternative, which is to be single, rent, and fill your apartment with plastic gremlins you saw on TikTok. But before we talk about that, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Saily. Saily is a simple eSIM app that helps you stay connected in over 200 countries around the world. As some of you know, I just got back from a wedding in Greece, and let me say, having an internet connection was a lifesaver. Instead of paying $10 a day or more in roaming fees to my carrier, I used an affordable 5GB plan from Saily that was more than enough for my weeks-long trip. And that data was super helpful for navigation when I got lost in the streets again, and when I left my phone in an Uber and I had to use Find My iPhone to try and track it down. Yeah, I wasn't kidding. The data was a lifesaver. But it's super easy to get started. Just download the Saily app on your phone, choose a data plan, and follow the simple instructions to set up your eSIM. It's compatible with both iOS and Android. There's 24/7 support, and it's so much easier than having to worry about buying a SIM card once you reach your destination. I do have one more trip in the books for this summer, and I'm definitely going to be using Saily again, rather than having to deal with that extra cost or that extra hassle. So don't wait around. Right now you can get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily data plans by using code INSCO at checkout. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/insco. Thank you again to Saily. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, so this is where I would like to introduce the concept of luxury poverty, aka reality for Gen Z. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you or someone you know is living this life. A life of like $200 to $300 gym memberships, a $2,000 studio apartment, $600 concert tickets, matcha, Pilates, Labubus. It's the Afterpay generation we're living in, where everyone you know is burning through their office job salary with such speed it's unbelievable. An investment to Gen Z isn't the stock market, it's the resale market. We're not buying gold, we're buying gold. A gold Cartier love bracelet dupe. Despite deep financial insecurities, or possibly because of those deep financial insecurities, paired with the influence of social media, young people appear to be addicted to a steady stream of little luxuries, and it's a treadmill that we will never get off of. Let's take that nice studio apartment that I mentioned earlier, which depending what part of the country you're living in is like $1,600 to $3,000 a month. And if you've ever lived in or seen one of these apartment buildings, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a dorm room for adults. They're marketed as luxury buildings, even though it's built with like the cheapest materials imaginable. There's probably a pool, a common space of some kind. For some reason, the trash fee is like $70 a month, and the building is named like the Avalon or some like that. And it's owned by some giant conglomerate that you pay every month, and you will never see that money again. And it's fun to see these apartment tours or to live in one of these, but unfortunately the boomers are right that this is literally just pissing money away. But what other option do you have? You can't afford a house on your own. You're not even sure if you want to live in X area for the rest of your life. And living in a place that's not a walking distance to a Starbucks is a fate worse than death anyway. So why not torch some money to feel like you're living large? The answer is because you're not living large. You may feel that way, but reality is you're getting the worst economic deal in the history of modern capitalism. The ultra rich have won, buying a home is out of reach, and so we've reduced ourselves to dumb displays of wealth and status, aka consumerism. Remember, before the internet, those at the top turned us against each other by making life all about a race to who has the biggest house. And that was bad, but at least everybody got a house out of it. Now, thanks to social media and the fact that housing costs have inflated beyond what any young person or young family can afford, the new frontier of capitalist competition is gym memberships, bag charms, and fast fashion hauls. And social media has truly democratized flexing as well. Now you can show off experiences too. What cafes you're in, what vacations you're taking, what concerts you're going to. Am I saying all of that's disingenuous? No, of course not. Just like there are many people who I'm sure are genuinely into Labubu. I have to make this disclaimer every video, because people always think I'm coming for them. If you're really into the Coachella lineup, that's sick. What I'm talking about is the people who go to Coachella to be seen at Coachella, or buying a Stanley Cup because it's the water bottle that everybody else has. We don't buy things that we value anymore, we buy things that we think other people value. And it's just simple math. The cost of living has gone up, wages have stayed the same, young people can't afford the classic milestones of growing up, like a home, wedding, children. So they've supplemented them with these brain-dead material pursuits, where at least they get a little bit of validation from the internet. And maybe that's an oversimplification, but I doubt I'm the only one who sees it that way. And that's why I think these trends are so infuriating to people. Like truly, there's probably 1,000 hours of content out there about crumble cookies on YouTube. Content on overconsumption is probably one of the fastest growing niches on the internet. And I think the environmental aspect is a big part of it for sure, but I also think there's a collective frustration with what these trends represent, which is a culture that appears to have completely thrown up the white flag against corporate greed and is now embracing it. We are a far cry from Occupy Wall Street, folks. And just reflecting on myself, I think that's what irks me about these trends. Because if we're being honest, what is the likelihood that someone who's gonna wait 12 hours in line to get their hands on one of the ugliest keychains I've ever seen in my life is going to ever, protest, vote, achieve any kind of social or political awareness? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Labubu owners of America are gonna come out as a true political force, but I doubt it. They're gonna come together for sure. Come together to send all their Labubus to the landfill the minute the trend cycle changes. Or those people throwing elbows at Target for a water bottle. Like the CEOs of Target and Stanley are probably watching this stuff, laughing their ass off. We've become consenting, willing, dancing monkeys in a system that offers us poison, plastic, polyester, and little else. You can't have a house, you can't have healthcare. What you can have is student loans and a never-ending stream of cheap from China. And I may be alone in this analysis. Maybe you just think these things are dumb because they're dumb and that's it. But I think it's darker because again, the drivers of these trends are not people who are really poor or in poverty, but people who are, what we would consider middle class today, or even upper middle class. Shein isn't propped up by the low-income consumer who's buying one or two things. They need people who are doing these $1,000 hauls. Crumble needs the person who's going to come back every week for whatever 4 new flavors of diabetes they came up with. And I'm not saying the social or environmental cost of $1,000 of polyester is comparable to that of cookies, or these ultra-processed sugar bombs that they're allowed to label cookies. But my point stands. There's a whole class of young people who have done everything right, got the good job, moved to the big city, are making a decent income, and yet they still can't build wealth or get ahead. The system is broken, and too many people in the mill have deluded themselves into thinking the system isn't broken just because they have material abundance available to them, even though it's abundance without any degree of actual financial security. The difference between a young person who makes $100,000 a year and spends it all, and a young person who makes $50,000 a year and spends it all, is strictly aesthetic. One spends it all on rent, and the other spends it all on Pilates, matcha, boba, Dubai chocolate, Shein, Temu, and rent. Would you rather be the latter than the former? Sure. But the latter is getting f***ed too. They just have an Amex Gold to show for it. And I don't blame our generation for spending it all, because planning for the future is hard when you feel like you don't have a future. Gen Z has the highest level of personal debt out of any generation, almost $100,000 a person. And again, when you're in a hole that deep, why not just get the $14 espresso martini? Just add that $14 to the pile. And plus, that EM is gonna look sick on your story. It's just luxury poverty. And this era of hyperconsumption is that additional layer that has turned it really into luxury slavery, because prioritizing lifestyle and social media points over long-term financial stability is understandable when financial stability seems so far away. But not trying at all is exactly what these corporations want. Our goals are further away than ever, so we set smaller, more achievable goals, like collectibles, that are achievable. And that's exactly what the ultra-wealthy want. They want us to blow it all on luxury goods, on subscriptions, on mass-produced dumb crap we don't want or need, for us to be in competition with each other, because then we won't be focused on the fact that they pay nothing in taxes, mistreat their workers, destroy the environment, and constantly jack up prices even when quality tanks. And by keeping us in this cycle of needing to outdo each other, they keep us as consumers, not citizens, and ensure that we're primarily concerned with just having a little bit more stuff than the next guy, rather than beg the question why those at the top have all the wealth and zero accountability. And I'll repeat, I like buying stuff. I like capitalism. I like getting to express myself, to pick where I spend my money, to start a business. But I want capitalism to work the way it's supposed to, where everybody gets a chance to build wealth, rather than all of it flowing into the hands of like 5 people. Because no amount of stuff will ever be a replacement for the security of owning the roof over your head, of not being bankrupted by the cost of medication, and of being able to have kids who you can look in the eye and know that their life will be marginally better than yours was. Our parents' generation will leave behind houses and actual wealth for their kids. Our generation is on track to leave behind Labubus to our cats. It doesn't have to be this way, okay? And we can change that. In America, at least, at a bare minimum, the government should be incentivizing the building of like 4 million new homes to close the supply gap. We need to drastically reduce the cost of higher education, eliminate the albatross of student debt that's hanging Gen Z and millennials by the neck and stopping them from being able to start the next phase of their life. We need new programs that help first-time home buyers, and to construct affordable housing for people who don't have the means to buy, and to penalize the institutional investors, because Wall Street should not be owning homes. And all that would represent like a decent start. Because look, I agree, this Labubu stuff, these trends, they're dumb. But anyone who points to this stuff to say that Gen Z doesn't have their financial priorities straight should f*** off. This is going back to like millennials spend all their money on avocado toast level analysis. Does the Labubu help? No, it doesn't help. And I think it's corny for a number of reasons. Yes, we are all buying things we don't need to be part of an ever-growing in-group on social media. However, buying a $35 doll for TikTok clout is an astronomically minuscule part of the scam that is modern American capitalism. And we can fix it, but it's gonna take some work. And that's not to say that in the meantime, the mentality of F it, we're all gonna die anyway, is helpful or good. Yes, you are poorer than your parents, but you don't need to make yourself poorer with a $19 smoothie, no matter how colorful and delicious it looks. The Nara Smith smoothie may distract you from the unpleasant realities we face, but only for a moment, folks. The feeling will be as fleeting as the spike in your blood sugar. Hopelessness is not an option, so we have to lock in, politically speaking. If not for a better life for yourself, then for your Labubu. Because I mean, come on, this little fucker did not travel all the way from Guangzhou, China to live with a perpetual renter.